can experience a full lifetime of emotions in the 100 miles.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remind myself about that. And that's something that I've been consciously working on for the last few months, because I feel like as a runner, the more you run and the more you do this longer distance stuff, the more you understand when you're mentally going to bonk and what that's going to feel like and start to think about ways to address it. And so I know the first 15 miles of a race, that's usually really hard for me. And I'm like, why am I here? I don't want to be doing this. I could just drop out any second. No one would care. Everyone would still love me. And now that I know that that's coming, I've found ways to kind of just allow that to be there and just to know that it doesn't have to affect my whole race. But with this 100-miler coming up, I know that might come in places where I don't necessarily expect it because I haven't done this distance. So just thinking about how I'm going to digest that mentally and move through it. And it's funny, I was talking about this with a few friends last night, is anytime we have a bad run, it's still not a bad run because you're like, oh, well, this is ultra training.
Yeah.
So it's going to be put in the bank in some capacity anyway.
I felt the same way about CIM. I puked for 12 miles of CIM. I was like, that's ultra training.
Yeah, you're like, well, now I can do an ultra. I'm ready to go.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, just being ready for what's going to happen there. But, and just constantly, I actually was listening to, on my flight yesterday, just like going through my liked songs, and one of my favorite Modest Mouse albums came up, and it's called Making Nothing Out of Something. And I was like, wow, what a good ultra mantra. It's like the one time where you have all these kind of negative triggers coming at you, but just make nothing of it. Like, just don't address them, or don't not address them, but don't necessarily let them take your whole race down, and just take them with a grain of salt and keep moving forward, just one step in front of the other.
So it's nice to say that when you're sitting here in Boulder on a podcast. By the way, you said this is your first live podcast. Yeah. You're doing great. This is amazing. You wouldn't know it. Okay, it's another to do it like in practice. So how do you take what you're saying right now and like actually do it? And the reason I ask is a while back, Peter Bromka had a little Twitter thread about his request for podcasters, and it was to ask harder questions and like ask for examples of, okay, you said this and it's like this esoteric thing and it sounds nice, but like if someone's listening, how do they take that and internalize that and make it useful for them? And I'm also sitting here like, okay, I'd like to do the same thing too. Like when presented with something new and hard, like how do you envision yourself executing on what you just said?
Yeah, I think first taking the practical steps to address things. For example, if it's something physical, if there's something wrong with my feet, to actually physically change shoes, or maybe put on shaving cream, or maybe I realize I need to adjust how I'm eating if something's not settling in my stomach right, or maybe I'm not getting enough calories in. But if it's something that is purely mental, I think just calming my heart rate, taking really slow, deep breaths, and not allowing myself to go through that mental spiral, which I have been sometimes I do pretty often in races. And I think that is just like keeping it calm. And then I know this sounds simple, but it does work for me. It's just bringing yourself back to why you're there and why you lined up in the first place, and thinking about like bringing myself back to this chair right now and thinking about why was I so excited at that point, and trying to channel that energy back. And it was the reason I fell in love with running trails in the first place, is that similar to seeing all my friends in one day, I realized this is a sport where you get to be outside all day, you get to run all day, you get to eat all day, and you get to socialize all day. Those are my 4 favorite things. And just like remembering that you get to do that right now. And sure, maybe it's like you're doing it for a couple hours longer than you want to, but it's such an honor to be able to be doing that. So reminding myself about that, bringing yourself back to really positive runs that you have with friends. And I guess another more physical way to solve the problems is I like to talk to people during races. I find that is a huge mood booster for me and really turns races around. So finding people throughout the course and asking them about how their race is going, asking them where they're from, taking both of your minds off of the race a little bit. I find that so helpful. And it's also just really nice to come out of a race with a bunch of new friends.
And it's an easy one to do it.
Yep.
June 24th. And it's 4:30 in the morning on race day. What's going through your head?
Hopefully, I'm very excited. I find I definitely do best before races when I'm really jazzed up, really energized, listening to some good music beforehand. I think thinking about what I'm eating in that last hour before the race is big, making sure I'm getting in enough food, but not too much to feel uncomfortable. I've done both and both feel horrible. But I've slowly dialed that in a little bit better. And honestly, the starting line's not that big of a deal for me and I like to keep it that way because the race is so long. And I remind myself this in 100 Ks is there's no point in really getting too jazzed up or too jittery at the starting line because it doesn't matter. You have so many miles to warm up, so many miles to get in your groove. So hopefully I'll be excited talking to friends, but hopefully not really thinking about racing at that point.
And are you a fan of ultra running yourself?
Yes. More honestly, a fan of the women's side of ultra running. I honestly don't know much about the men's side.
So what is it going to be like being on a starting line with people you're a fan of?
I am so excited. And this goes back to...
By the way, she's beaming right now if you can't see from watching on YouTube.
I just like being around those people, and I got like a glimpse of it on Memorial Day training camp when a lot of those women were there. It's just so cool to have to, and for someone who I'm incredibly social, I love to meet people. I love to hear their stories. And also it's just a treat too when the people you're meeting are awesome and interesting and incredibly talented. And so spending those 3 days over a training camp running with these other women, I was just in awe. And I just felt like I was just soaking up so much energy from them. And they all have many different side quests along with running, if that's additional jobs, if that's getting additional schooling, if additional businesses they run, or maybe they're moms. But they just come to every run with the same amount of energy that I do, even though I feel like they seem to have accomplished so much more and seem to have so much more on their plate than I do. And I think that's really awesome and something to look up to. And I think, and then just, it's a really crazy idea that I am going to be on the same starting line as women who were the first women I followed on Instagram or followed podcasts that they were on when I first discovered this sport. Like I've been listening to their conversations and now I'm having my own conversation with them. It's such a cool thing.
Who are some of those people, if I can ask that?
Yeah, Courtney DeWalter, Katie Scheid, especially she's an East Coaster, Camille Herron. I got the chance to chat with Ida and Esther a bunch during Memorial Day camp, and Katie Asmuth. I mean, I could list like 20 of the women on the starting line. Like they're all just so cool.
Yeah. I went for a 2-hour run in Leadville with Courtney and I was just like blown away by how many questions she asked. And so many of these people are just so stoked on life and that other people are interested in what they're doing and passionate about similar things. Devin Yanko is another one in that group. Devin was like one of the first people I had on this podcast. And she helped me get into trail running. So it's really cool to see her back on that start line. She's had some really awesome performances lately and some really hard performances lately. So hopefully she's got the former this month. Yeah,
I do know every year at Western, of course, it's always a stacked field, but for some reason, and maybe this is just because I'm, neck deep in it this year, but it feels like it truly is an incredible starting list. And just the achievements of these women on the starting list just blow my mind. And it's women who've been in the sport for many years like Devin, and then women like me who are pretty new in the sport. And I think that's just so cool that we have the new fresh blood and also the incredibly experienced people all on the line together.